now we're going to bring up our keynote speaker, is Dr. Rodney Sampson. He is the CEO of OHUB and is heralded as the leading inclusive ecosystem builder in the world, particularly his mission to ensure that undertapped communities have equitable access to multi-generational wealth creation opportunities afforded in the innovation economy, as defined paths to reducing poverty and racial wealth gaps everywhere. He is the head of diversity at ABC's hit TV show Shark Tank. He is a senior fellow, Brookings Institution, professor at Duke, UNC, and Morehouse. And Dr. Sampson founded the HBCU at South by Southwest in 2016, and he brought 500 HBCU students to South by Southwest, and 90% of them were hired. So please help me welcome Dr. Rodney Sampson.
Why don't you all give yourselves a hand for creating change? I often say that when we get to have conversations like this is sort of a signal or a reflection on the work. A lot of people think conversations are the work, but they aren't. It's real work that actually happens every day in terms of legislation and the relationships that are required to actually move legislation forward and get it passed and get it signed, and then the real work definitely begins. And we are definitely in an unprecedented time in history. When you just look at the current administration, you look at the federal legislation that has been passed, even going back to ARPA, and the renewal of the state small business credit initiative, and you look at the CHIPS bill, which has tech hubs, and the cybersecurity opportunity act. You look at NSF engines. There's so much legislation that hopefully will account for what some of the private sector has said they were going to do, especially in 2020. We had a lot of folks that said a lot of things in 2020, and now we're not there. But I think this federal legislation gives us an opportunity to actually create some of that equity and parity that we've been talking about. But to go back in history a little bit, I'm also excited that my wife of 24 years is with me this evening. So I started my first technology company in 2000. And to give you a little kind of tech startup adventure history, because actually Maryland, particularly Baltimore, plays a role in that. There were 3 black founders in the late 90s, early 2000s that had raised in excess of $1 million in venture capital. There was Omar Wassel with Black Planet. You don't have to tell us if you had a Black Planet profile. Omar raised over $4 million and had an exit from his company. I co-founded a company called Multicast Media Technologies, and we were innovators of what then became known, or eventually became known as streaming technologies. It was called IPTV back then. And we had a vertical for churches called Streaming Faith. I think one of our first, y'all remember Streaming Faith? One of the first pastors in this region was Dr. Jamal Bryant in Atlanta. He was one of the Preach Black Men Preach on Streaming Faith. We raised over $4 million, and that company was acquired as well. And then there was Clarence Wu. Some of you might know Clarence and his company that was in this region. And now Clarence had an exit as well. So when you look at the math and you look at black founders who were actually able to raise early stage, high risk venture capital, when we were trusted with those funds, the data reflected that we were able to return that capital and make money for our respective investors as well. So that was my first startup. The first 10 years of my career was as a founder, as an operator. And in around 2010, things started to shift. Building high growth companies is very, very hard. It's like wearing the hat of a policymaker and an operator of a business at the same time. You're making key decisions. You're working in the business and on the business when you work on a high growth startup. And so I started to want more in terms of what Napoleon Hill calls definitive purpose. You know, why was I created? Why, you know, had I been afforded the privilege to be lucky enough to even know what venture capital was, and to know what software engineering was, and to know what go-to-market was, and have enough relationships to stumble really into the right place, and came to understand that yes, I was black, yes, I was in Atlanta, but when I became a high-growth founder with venture capital, I then became privileged, and it wasn't enough for me to be the only one. And so we started working on a concept called Opportunity Hub. And right before Opportunity Hub, I have to update the bio a little bit. I actually was the head of diversity at ABC Shark Tank from 2013 to 2015, and then I passed that mantle on to Brandon Andrews at Values Partnership, who resides in the DMV area to this day. Right before that, I published my fourth book, Keynote, 12 Innovative Currencies for Transforming Your Business and Life. I guess some of you read that, inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So that became the philosophical framework for how we could participate in the innovation economy at scale. But in 2013, Opportunity Hub was born, and we were really the first kind of multi-campus black technology hub, co-working space. No one was really saying ecosystem then, and it sort of kind of evolved over that period. So Opportunity Hub has continued to scale. We started off as placemaking, but we added programming very quickly. So we went from placemaking to programming. Programming included one of the nation's first full-stack software development programs, which was the model for the Tech Hire Initiative in the Obama administration. From there, we added our first pre-accelerator. We were one of the first black pre-accelerators in the country, one of the first black incubators in the country. And then, you know, if you work with enough founders and they start asking you for money. So you're either going to, you know, put up or shut up, right, and start writing some checks. And so we started making some early bets, and I think today we are collecting about 7 venture funds, probably 120 startups. I'll wrap this up by, I'm a big believer in codification of your work because it can then become a model for others. And so I was fortunate to join Brookings Institution as a non-resident senior fellow, visiting professor at UNC, Duke, and Morehouse. Was one of the first entrepreneurship professors at Morehouse as well. And I'll pause there.